So you bought the 247 and you just want to go fly. Let's get some things set up. First, talk to Jack. Make sure you have fuel. Yeah, we got some fuel, fuel. When you change these quantities and press the Make It So button, it sends Jack outside to put in the wheel chocks and do these things. 10 more tasks, 9 more tasks, open the filler, top up the tank, so on and so on and so on. That takes a while, so you want to get Jack started. After that page is the engine startup page. We're going to need that in a minute, but not yet. First, let's work our way across the cockpit. We'll open the windows so we can yell at Jack. Check. Parking brake is on. Great. This is the primer. We're going to set the primer to the left engine. We're going to open the primer main valve. If you leave the primer main valve closed, you can't move the primer. With it open, you can prime the engine. Pull and push. This switches between the main and the aux tank for the right-hand fuel gauge. The left-hand gauge only has one tank. The right side has 2 tanks. Pull and release to check your fuel. This switches the manifold pressure gauge between the left and the right engines. This switches your temperature gauge between cylinder 1, cylinder 4, the carb, some disconnected inputs, and the right hand, carb, cylinder 4, and cylinder 1. Moving across the cockpit, we've got some lights. If the battery is on, we get lights. And over here, we can turn on cabin lights, dome lights, courtesy lights, and as we turn those things on, we see additional draw on the battery. Moving across the panel, we're going to turn the magnetos on, both engines, and this is a cutoff. We're going to push that in, pull off, push on. Smoking, yes, let's smoke. Lights, don't need the landing lights. We do need, sure, we'll turn the nav lights on. That might kill the battery. Jack's out there, he'll figure out the engine's about to start. And the last thing we're going to need on this panel is fuel. Both allows fuel to flow to both carburetors. Off, left on, both, right on, off. We'll set this to both. And fuel selector. Sure, there's fuel in the left tank. We'll use that one. Working our way across the pedestal, we have a friction lock, friction lock, friction lock, prop levers. I'm going to use USB hardware for these things, prop levers, throttle levers, mixture levers. Mixtures for both engines go full rich, props for both engines go full forward. Throttles get cracked a little bit. Oil shutters on the ground. We're going to open the oil shutters so we don't overheat the engines, and it's above freezing today, so we're going to leave the carb heat off, probably even after takeoff for a little while. We'll think about that later on. Last handle you need to know about on the pedestal is the wobble pump. The wobble pump is what pressurizes the fuel system. Now that we have fuel tanks on and carbs fed, when we wobble the wobble, we get fuel. This fuel pressure will decay. So you got to wobble the wobble right before you start the engine. So to start the engine, we have to do 3 things. We have to yell at Jack to crank the flywheel. We have to prime the engine. We have to give it fuel pressure. And we have to yell at Jack to connect the flywheel. I guess that's 4 things. So he's done filling up the tanks. We're going to tell him to get the ladder and attach the crank. Both sides, both engines. Parking brake is on. He put the chocks in. Just going to wait for him to put the stairs there. All right, Jack, wind up the flywheel. Crank, crank, crank. While he's cranking, we wobble. check mags. Mags both, not cut off. Primer left, primer pulled and pushed. We had fuel pressure, we had mixture, we had throttle, we had prop. If at first you don't succeed, tell Jack to go back to work. If you have USB SIM hardware, you might have a magneto switch that does not talk to the magneto switch on this dashboard. I have the switch on my Bravo set to off, which cuts off the mags in the SIM without showing you that it has cut off the mags in the SIM. Tell Jack to do it again. Wobble, wobble. And when you hear it reach that high pitch, it starts to go up and down. Hit it at the high point and hope for the best. Well, what could we be doing wrong? Fuel tanks are definitely on. Primer's definitely selected. We'll primer again. So, a couple gotchas. If you have a hardware switch for magnetos, it won't show on the dash. Do check it on your desk, whatever your setup is. Just close this so you guys can still hear me. If you have USB hardware, do check it on your desk. It won't show up here even if it's cut off, but it will interrupt the logic in the SIM for the magnetos. And 2, prime the engine every time if the engine's cold. So, over to the right side, we'll wind up the flywheel. Set the primer to the right. Take a look out the window. Jack's doing his thing. Wobble, wobble. The right one I find is pretty hard to hear. I don't really know when to hit the gas other than by the time he makes it past about 10 or so percent. Usually you get lucky. Today ain't the day. Try again, buddy. Plenty of fuel pressure. I see the crank moving. Not near anything, but make sure we're up above 5 psi, about 5 psi. There we go. And that's it. Once you get those things, you got her up and running. But your oil temp's pretty low, and what that leads to is really, really high oil pressures. You're going to want to keep the engines at idle while that oil temp comes up. Until the oil temp comes up, there's a bypass valve that opens once you hit max pressure that prevents the engine from going over pressure. When that happens, you get less and less flow through the engine. So let's get these guys warmed up, close the oil shutters, throw that back up on the dash. And we'll keep an eye on temps and pressures here for a little bit. Acceleration doesn't exactly work well, but once you get those temps and pressures stabilized, you have Jack pull the chocks. And you're ready to go fly. If you made it this far, go ahead and do it on your own. But we'll take it over to the line, just see what we can learn about how these engines warm up, whether we get that pressure back down or not. Takeoff point that direction. Looks like there's some taxiways on the other side of that runway. So checking oil temp, oil pressure again. Hey, great news. Temp's up a hair, pressure is down a lot. You don't want to see that pressure on the peg, because when it is, you're sitting on the bypass valve. That is how you get into trouble. So we're getting ready to climb out. Our oil's warm. We're going to go ahead and open those up. Check carb temps, down about freezing. Give it a little bit of carb heat. Outdoor air temp is 55. Maybe in the danger zone. Second, set the parking brake, do a quick prop governor check. This is a good moment to learn about how these buttons work. If you hit the prop feather, manual tells me if I'm sitting here at 1500 RPM, I got the props full forward, I'm going to give it a little more gas till I get to 1500. Double check, I did put that parking brake on. Here, if I hit this button, an electric pump will turn on, dump a bunch of oil into the prop hub, and should get me fully feathered in about 10 seconds. Once it gets the full feather, this button will pop back out on its own. This should be around 500 RPM. Pop. As soon as that pops back out, go ahead and hit the button again. And we should feather. Come on, little buddy, I believe in you. Right side works the same way. You should check it, you should test it. We're not going to, we're going to save some time. Here you can see, I'll put a little more gas on the left. You can get a quick look at how that manifold pressure gauge works. Put these back together. About right. Pull back, brake off. Throttles forward just to that red line on the manifold pressure gauge. And let's quit the headwind. The headwind we got today. Solid 100-foot takeoff roll. For the climb, crank it back to about 32. Check the temps and pressures again. You see oil pressure is real high, oil temp is real low. We're going to go ahead and close those shutters. Try to get this oil warmed back up and get it to thin out. We're not quite sitting on that 120-degree peg for the oil pressure, so hopefully we don't have the bypass valves kicked in. As we're climbing here, we're going to slow the engines down a little. Should slow down the oil pump. Should buy us a little margin on that oil pressure. Just like that, we're flying. Hope you like it. Hope that makes sense. The manual tells you pretty much the same thing and much, much more. It's a great read, and if